name is Rachel Beatty, and this is my speech for Mara Levin's Basic Communication class, CRN number 33540. Over to the side, we have my visual aid on genetically modified organisms. Right now there's a shot of some basic plant biology and how plant pollination works. We're going to talk about that a little bit so we can understand the basics of how GMOs work. Here's some cell structures that I've used to demonstrate how scientists can manipulate the DNA themselves. And on the bottom I've included a timeline of Monsanto because I'm going to discuss a little bit about how Monsanto is related to genetically modified organisms. Over on the right and left, we've got bullet point listings of the two different opinions regarding GMOs, those in favor for and those against. And as soon as we're done with this pan shot, we'll show you my audience, and then we'll get started on my speech. We got 4 different participants, including my cameraman. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, welcome to my house, guys. My name is Rachel, and for the next 5 to 7 minutes, I'm going to be presenting on GMOs, or genetically modified organisms. And in 2014 of November, Oregon had an election ballot where measure number 92 proposed that genetically modified organism foodstuffs be regulated and labeled so that consumers could make informed decisions about their purchases. The measure did not pass, but only by 802 votes. So suffice it to say, there's definitely a divide between those in favor for and those against. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about the opinions of both sides, and then first we're going to talk a little bit about plant basics. And before we get into that, I just want to say that of all my research, I am inconclusive about the safety and overall health benefits of GMO, but what I am conclusive on is that there needs to be more scientific research made available to the public so that they can make informed decisions. So, on to some plant basics. For thousands and thousands of years, mankind has used his knowledge to be able to influence the production of offspring of many different types of species, including animals and plants. With plants specifically, it is known as horticulture. And horticulturists use a naturally occurring plant pollination technique, and you can see illustrated in the picture that the pollen goes to the stigma of the flower, travels down the pollen tubes where it gets to the ovule, and then matures to become a seed, and through naturally occurring environmental conditions like wind or rain, the seeds get spread so that they can grow in other areas. The biggest difference that I saw between GMOs and horticulturist techniques is that horticulturists use a naturally occurring offspring production by plants, and they could continue on without the influence of man, whereas genetic modifications have to have laboratory usage and high technology where scientists can actually go into individual cells and into the nucleus where all the genetic makeup is kept and either add, subtract, or substitute specific genomes into the DNA. And in one case, scientists actually inserted scorpion genome into a cabbage plant, which in and of itself was very controversial. And speaking of controversy, we're going to get onto the 2 different opinions regarding about GMOs. So first we have the advocates, and one of the biggest advocates is a large seed company called Monsanto, where they patent genetically modified seeds. We'll talk about them in a little bit. Their main purpose, if you look at their website, is to prevent world hunger through supplying developing countries with seeds that are higher resistant to pests and weather and also more nutritionally dense. And those objectives, those purposes are all great, but there is some debate on how realistic those purposes are. So Monsanto has been around for about the last 100 years. It started in 1900 as a company that produced artificial sweeteners, and throughout time its history has been speckled with lots of politics, including some herbicidal warfare that it was involved in the Vietnam War, where it actually manufactured Agent Orange. So it's got kind of a questionable history that people don't seem to want to forget. Currently, it is known to be the world's largest grossing seed company. It's also famous for the herbicide Roundup and creating the Terminator seed, which is a seed that doesn't reproduce and terminates at the end of the season. So we looked at the opinions for GMOs, and that was to prevent world hunger primarily. And now we're going to look at the opposition. And one of the biggest problems that those against GMOs have is that while the seeds are man-made and Monsanto requires farmers to buy and purchase them annually, any seed that is found in a crop where a farmer did not purchase it specifically, they are liable to get sued by Monsanto. And this is really unfair to those who oppose GMOs, because small agricultural farmers can't influence the wind direction or pollination techniques. And there have been, according to Monsanto's website, 147 out of 350,000 farmers that have been taken to court. And while it might seem like a small number, in the grand scheme of things, the population that it's affected has been pretty large, with one other opinion or viewpoint being affected, which is the organic market. So if a small agricultural farmer has contaminated crops by GMO seeds, and it makes it really hard for him to be able to market or sell his produce to an organic market because it's no longer clean. Of course, there's other reasons why why people are opposed to it. One of them is that while it may, kill weeds, it may also encourage higher pest-resistant weeds to grow, and that's always something to be concerned about. And while those in favor of GMOs claim that they're making more nutritionally dense food, there's also the idea that our bodies may not be able to absorb them as well because they won't recognize them as something that's found naturally. So those are a little bit of the opinions and ideas for the advocates, and those in opposition of GMOs. We've learned a little bit about plant basics, and from my research, as I mentioned before, I can tell that there definitely needs to be more scientific research made available to the public so they can make informed decisions. And I hope you guys learned something from my speech. Thank you for taking the time to listen. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask.
What happened to the scorpion cabbage?
What happened to the scorpion cabbage?
Yeah, what did they do with that?
As far as I know, it was safe. And nothing really came of it except worried consumers.